This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from OpenLMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in edtech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And OpenLMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. My name's Ladek, and my guest for this episode is Brian Walter. He is the co-founder and operator of two businesses, Extreme Meetings and Extreme Trainings. He does it all, from being an internal communications consultant to a speaker and a trainer to video script writing and producing. And he's actually freaking hilarious. In this extreme conversation, Brian and I talk about what exactly sticky training is, how you can recognize it, and why still in 2023, it's so hard to build effective training, except maybe for salespeople. We then walk through how to build training that's actually sticky by first asking, what is it that you want that you don't already have, to determining what is actually trainable, to creating a truly memorable experience. We then walk through Brian's GFSA Framework, or GFSA Framework, to understand what he means by getable, feelable, sayable, and actionable training. Brian and I then walk through a few stories around unintended outcomes from his training model that have happened in the past and are pretty hilarious. Brian then talks through what makes building something with the GFSA model a challenge. So, it's not a model that's infallible, but again, going back to those unintended consequences, sometimes great things happen. And then finally, Brian discusses whether or not and how GFSA could work in a typical asynchronous online learning experience, and how to progressively continue to buy attention to captivate the audience. And remember, we record this podcast live so that we can interact with you, our listeners, in real time. So if you'd like to join the fun every week on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, just come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe. Now, I give you Brian Walter. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn podcast. My name's Ladek. As you just heard, I work for a company called OpenLMS. See if I get the right finger. I always get that wrong. And I am very, very excited to have my guest today is Brian Walter. Hello, sir. How are you today?
Excellent. Ready to leap into sticky content. Woo!
If you leap into sticky content, I think that means that you don't bounce off it, right? You don't bounce back. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works. Brian,
it gets complicated.
As I do with everybody on the show, why don't we start out with you giving us the 10 seconds, the 30 seconds, whatever you'd like, on who you are, your organization that you work for, the kind of trainings that you develop, and how you interact here in this education space.
Well, excellent. So again, as you said, my name is Brian Walter. I am a trainer, speaker, MC, internal communications consultant. I run two companies. When I say I mean my wife and I run, because we are a certified women-owned business, and I'm the talent who basically works for my wife. We do extreme trainings and extreme meetings. So I'm in the training space and also the meeting space, because those oftentimes converge, because both are gathering people together to communicate information. And then, do you just want to communicate, or you actually want them to do something with it? And so that's where those things blend together. Also, a video producer, and we do graphics, presentation graphics, and training graphics. So pretty much if it's internal communication, training, speaking, meetings, trying to get a message across, that's what we try to do.
Fantastic. I love it. A jack of all trades. That's one of super fantastic.
And master of none. That's right. Okay.
You said it, not me. You said it, not me. What? So if you were to, put a definition on what sticky training is, and I had to hold you to it, like, what would you? How do I recognize it? How do I see it? Like, how
Can I pull it off the shelf and say, oh, that's going to be sticky or not? Or like, what's the definition?
I would say the bumper sticker or the tattoo on the inside of your left, arm would be basically the content sticks with them. Now that sounds so easy. Well, look, it's basically, or it's like they remember it, whatever it is. It's interesting. I did some interviews with training directors and VPs earlier this year, and I had them rattle off like, okay, what are like your top needs? The question used to be like, what keeps you up at night? But usually it's I'm getting older. But when we talk about professionally, and they rattle off a bunch of things, but one of the biggest was that participants will remember the training. And I think that's where it gets sticky, because the harsh truth that we don't like admitting is that we put on these elaborate training courses, whether they be virtual or in person or hybrid, whether it's all day, where it's an hour, 90 minutes, micro training, all of these different things. And the business owners are like, yeah, they didn't remember any of it. Didn't make an impact. And it's like, darn it. And as trainers, directors, we struggle with the respect or the lack of respect we get from the business owners, or the business leaders in the organizations or the associations that are the clients that we work for, because we want to be a vital partner in that. Okay, when you send your people to this, which is a big deal, when you send your people that very expensive thing and we train them on this thing, they'll stinking remember what it was about. And that really is the core of sticky content training. It's like they remembered it.
And so if I can challenge you to give me a core cause, right? So, I mean, we're here, you and I, we're recording this right now for posterity, the middle of July, 2023. And I still continue to scratch my head as somebody who's been reporting and on this and hosting, all kinds of people like yourself since 2015. This is still a problem. So
it's still a problem because here's the core reason, right? Okay. What the core reason, the problem is that we try to train humans. That's the thing. And also there is so often, both in advance, but especially in training, it sounds crazy, but there's a murkiness on what we're actually trying to do. Because when you classically say, we want to train someone, there's this belief that there's this very specific thing. We want to train them to do X. But only a small fraction of training is really training a highly specific skill. Like, here's a specific thing you want to do. Like, let's say you wanted to train managers on how to do better interviewing. That sounds so specific, doesn't it? Like, hey, you're not doing such a good job. We want you to do better interviewing. How do we know if it worked? Well, they completed the course. No, they completed the training. They report back that they felt it was better. There's no objective measurement at all. And so we're guessing on whether, like, what is it that we are training them to do. So this is where it gets complicated, because so much of our success is utterly subjective as opposed to objective. Now, there are objective things, of course. The more tactical things are like, okay, they need to operate this piece of machinery. They need to be able to be compliant with something like that. Those are very specific, measurable things. But the large swaths of training in virtually every organization, leadership training, management training, customer service training, dealing with change, sales. Now, the great thing with sales, at least there's a measurement that sales go up to sales go down.
Sales
is all those things, the only ones, sales is does it, but all those, like, sales is the one that actually has a measurement. Because if you're a sales manager, it's like, if your training can help us make that number go up at all, we're in. There you go.
Hi there. I'm sorry to break into the show right now, but if you're enjoying this show, if you are challenged, if you're inspired, if you're learning something, if you think that you're going to be able to get something out of this to put into your practice, do me a quick favor. pause right now and just hit subscribe on your podcast player right now. It doesn't matter which one, just hit subscribe, because that way it'll make sure that you never miss an episode in the future. Thanks. Now back to the show.
So that's why I think it comes. This is why I think we're still struggling this, and we will continue to do this. And again, where we make improvements is on the front end. What is it we want to be sticky? That is the profound question. That should be the hashtag. What should stick? Hashtag. What should stick? And that's why when I'm working with clients, the very first thing I ask them is I go all Spice Girls on them. You're thinking, Brian, what do you mean Spice Girls? Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. I want a what? I want a what? What do you want them to do? Now, there could be a training on respect to the workplace. Okay, so is it training? Not classical training. And I think part of it is that we want to get specific around what it is we're trying to accomplish. Like, for example, is the training really about awareness? Like, we're training them to be aware of something they didn't know. We're training them to change what they believe about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's like that could be in a training course. It's like, what are they actually going to do? It's like, well, I won't be so mean to people different from me. Okay, but really we're going for ahas in a training course sometimes. It could be that there's certain concepts that, like, first you got to get the concept, and then maybe that will ultimately affect your behavior. But we don't always go directly to, well, here's the behaviors we want to change when we're designing courses. And that's where we still continue to struggle, and likely will continue to struggle for a long time.
Such a good, fantastic complete answer. So where do we start with sticky training? And obviously you said, what is it that you want to train, right? I love the Spice Girls analogy there, or actually vector, right? Yeah. What's the next step there? So if we have identified a thing or a set of things that we want to train, we want to make them sticky, what do we do next?
Well, I think that the first place, again, is going with the Spice Girls thing, but maybe making that a little more nuanced than just, a pop song from the 90s. Would be, I like to say, like, when I'm working with clients, I like to say, what is it you want that you don't already have? Now, I'm expecting also that a trainer, like whether it be the developer or the training director or the training VP or whoever's in charge of, we're going to create a new class in response to a business or organizational need. It's like, I like to say, what does the business owner, like, or the need owner want that they don't already have? And I think the more time we spend on that, then the better the training can ultimately be, especially the more sticky it can be. But the harsh truth is that just like we struggle with, generalities, so do our business owners. It's like, well, we want people to be more motivated, more loyal. What does that mean?
Right. What does that look like?
And it's like, well, we want retention. We want to improve our retention. Okay. Retention, does that, okay, well, that's like, okay, you want people to stay longer. What's longer? If I'm a Gen, a millennial or a Gen Z, that's going to be a very different number than if I'm a Gen X. Like, well, what is more? It's like a year more, 6 months more, 5 years more. Like, what do you actually want? There's a term that I created a number of years ago. I called it emphatitudes, which are platitudes stated emphatically. Too often when we're dealing with our business owners, it's like, they say things, it's like, customer service, the customer's always right. We really need to do that. It's like, the customer's always right. Let's think about what we're actually training them to do. And then all the training's about how to handle when the customer's wrong.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Okay. So you said this, but all the training isn't about the customer being right. It's about the customer being wrong, and like compensating for the fact that we don't want to, because, calling them a stupid customer, that's bad. So the skill set. So it's really getting the clarity. What do we want that we don't already have? And a lot of the times those things aren't skills. Those things are concepts, beliefs, perceptions, awareness, because a lot of times through a training course, if we can get a mental shift, that will ultimately result in a behavior shift that you couldn't go directly there.
Can I wrap these in the culture term? Like, like there's a business culture we want them to
No,
adapt
I'm kidding, of
or
course.
excuse me, adopt or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, again, the culture is going to matter, both their larger culture, and like for right now, if I was in a super red state, I would not use terms diversity, equity, inclusion right now, because that's a problem. And it's like, okay, what is it I want? I want our company to be an employer of choice. And to do that, we're going to have to hire young people who have different values and expectations than the older people who are hiring them. But on the other hand, if I'm trying to train those older people, if I use all the terms that they are scared of, it's not going to work.
It's not
and
going to go well.
to say, like, diversity, equity, inclusion in training for old farts.
Right.
Okay, well, that's going to be a problem. Like, we're setting up conflict here, but it's like, how to get young people to want to work here. How to get young people to want to work for you. How to get young people to stay working for you. Like, when we frame it that way, then it's like, okay, we're going to change what they think, which is like, a friend of mine, Anna Layata, she is a trainer and speaker, and she speaks and trains on generations in the workplace. She had a simple exercise where she does polling on the front end of stuff. And again, she's talking about, you've got the young boomers, the Xers, the millennials, and Gen Z who are in the workplace and all these issues. And she's wanting to get them to realize that, okay, different generations have different values and perceptions. And so she does a poll, and her client was like a young boomer. So late 50s, early 60s, still there, working hard. And it's like, yeah, it's all about the work, things like that. And one question was in the poll, which is, how many Star Wars movies have you seen? All of them, most of them, some of them, none of them. And the boomer person, of course, the young boomer, is like, well, that was a seminal thing during the 70s and 80s. It's like, well, of course, everyone's seen all of them. And this boomer manager was gobsmacked to see that 20% of the people who answered it had not seen any of them. And it blew this guy's mind. But here's the fascinating thing. That insight, it's like, so different age groups really do have different reference points, and common experiences are not always common. And so that just little polling, emotional shock and awe thing helped change a concept for that young boomer leader that allowed him to be open up to the idea of generational currencies, which is something that Anna talks about.
Super cool. So if you've managed to discover that thing that you don't have, right? What do I do next?
All right. So the great thing is now that as soon as you have a target that is a great target, and then I like to say, before we try to say sticky content, then say, this is the hardest thing for trainers to do. Is there a trainable solution? I mean, it's kind of like a lot of times when you start talking with what we like to think, it's like we're trying to do world peace. It's like we're trying to boil the ocean. It's like, well, in one training class, it's like, we want to change their behavior, we want to change their beliefs, we want to do this, and if we could do it in less than 90 minutes, that would be great. And not everyone can come.
Yeah.
Okay, so and it's not mandatory. Okay, and the leaders aren't going to do it first. Oh, okay. So it's like, is it possible? What portion of what we want is possible through training? And then once we've identified it, now we can focus on how to achieve those things. Now, there's an acronym, because I think anything good in the training world has to be in an acronym. Otherwise,
100%.
It doesn't.
It doesn't exist if you don't have an acronym. 100%.
Exactly. So I created an acronym. So I call it GFSA, GFSA. I should have a slide here. It's like GFSA, GFSA, which is getable, feelable, shareable, actionable. Getable, feelable, shareable, actionable. Made it easy with everything ends in able, not a bull, because that would be something else, but gettable, feelable, sayable. I even said shareable, sayable, and actionable. There, oh, what is GIF? So there you go. It's like type in again, gettable, feelable, sayable, actionable. So if you have these components, you are more likely to have sticky content. So let's break this down. So gettable is a remembered aha. A remembered aha. So whatever this thing you're wanting them to do, it is that you're wanting to train them. It's like, there's got to be some point where I call the Scooby-Doo response, where they're like, I mean, someone needs to react. I didn't know that. Now, a good test is when evaluating your curriculum is how long into a training class does a participant have to go before they hear something they didn't already know? And when you ask yourself that question, you look at training, it's sometimes shocking how long it takes before they go, well, yeah, we had all this. It's like, during that whole time where they're not hearing anything they didn't already know, it's like they're getting disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the first thing is like, if you're training someone on whatever this objective is, there has to be a gettable, there has to be a concept, there has to be a mental shift, a paradigm shift, depending on how big or small the thing is, but there has to be something that they get that is like, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Wow. It's like, and it's got to hit them like boom. So it's got to be gettable. Like, instead of like, there are a lot of differences and blah, 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 blah. Differences. Okay. I don't get what you're saying. I mean, like, that's information, but no insights. And so to me, it's like the whole thing is like, a lot of times as trainers, we say we are information spewers. Or maybe we're Spidey. We're spewing information here. Information aren't insights. And so there's some sort of an insight, a gettable concept, a point where they go, ah. Now, the second aspect of that is whatever that insight is, they have to feel it. Because so much of, behavior change requires emotion. Behavior change, and intellectually, we know that. So this is not like someone's listening to this going, really, Brian, thank you for being Captain Obvious. Really, emotion matters. Woohoo, thank you so much. Well, Ladek should really get more guests like you. Yes, we know that's an obvious point, but with that obviousness, we don't ever do an emotional audit of our own training and saying, okay, what is going to hook their emotions around this point, this gettable aha? They've got to feel it. Now, again, a lot of different feelings. You can have joy, you can have fear, you can have surprise. I mean, there's a lot of different emotions here, but they have to like feel something. Like, I really want that. I'm really surprised by that. That's really cool. I'm terrified by that. I'm a little mixture of both.
To say, like, in today's world, like, what do you think? What are the typical feelings that either you would coach someone to build or you would build in yours? Do you go more fear-based, or do you go more like, do you bring it back to anxiety and a little, like or is it like,
I think it depends on who you're training with, of course, but I think us wanting to avoid things we don't want is super powerful. Now, we don't have to get you like terrified, like, I mean, because that's too much. But we have to realize that they're not just consequences. We have to feel that we don't consequences. And a lot of time that comes down to a story. Like, here's something that happened to someone. So here's an experience that they had. Let's walk through their shoes where like, woof. And we get to have that whole thing of vicarious consequence avoidance, which is a very powerful emotion. You don't have to terrify me, but it's like, I want to just have a sliver of that vicarious emotion. Like, wow, I wouldn't have wanted to have been her or him or something like that. But then there's the positive. It's like, oh, but I want to be more like her experience or his experience. And so my thought is like, generally within a course, I think we've got to mix these things, but still there's got to be a profound emotion. And sometimes it's, again, surprise is an emotion. Surprise is an emotion. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that. And that's something in a training class has to be an environment where we discover we're actually wrong on some things. Now, you don't always want to say it that way because people don't like to be told that they're wrong. But it's like when they discover, it's like, I thought this, but there's a counterintuitive, at least from my intuition, of that. We feel that. And once we feel that and it's aligned with the concept that we get, then it's like, okay, we're cooking with gas. We're making progress. Actually, I probably shouldn't use the phrase cooking with gas anymore because they're reducing cooking with gas. So I'll need to come up with a new phrase for that. So that's, the getable and the feelable. But then we get to the sayable. And this is and you could say sayable, you could say shareable. I like saying sayable, which is we need to give them new words. Now, it could be an acronym. It could be a phrase. It could be a line, but it's some way to articulate whatever this aha was. And if we can give people to use a new language, then they'll start saying it and they'll adopt it and make it their own. And this is a powerful thing. This was, again, years ago, I worked for a department store chain called the Bon Marché. Now it's a Macy's like every other department store in the United States. But, and it was in the Pacific Northwest, and they came up with this campaign used internally, and it was called Bon Life. And they said it's like, basically the way we do things here in the Northwest, and it had a certain style. And so they started training. Okay, here is, Bon Life, which kind of became our way of doing things. Now, the great thing is by giving them this concept, it's like the way we do things in the Northwest, Bon Life, is employees started using it to get what they want and avoided what they don't want, which is success. Because in a meeting, they could suddenly say, I don't know, Ladek, that doesn't sound very Bon Life to me. And then you would have to defend yourself. Well, I know why you would think that, Brian, but you're actually wrong. Here's why this idea is Bon Life. So by giving people language, they use it, and then that concept gets permeated through an organization. But what I like to say is a sayable it. So it's a repeatable it. Like, what was Ladek's training course about? What is going to come out of my mouth? Like, let's not leave that to chance. Let's give them say, well, basically it was about blah or blah, blah, blah. Or basically his key point was blah, 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 blah. When it's that, it can go verbally viral within the class and within the organization. In other words, I heard it from you and I can immediately repeat it to someone else who can immediately repeat it to someone else. If someone says, so what was that class about? And they say leadership stuff. Nothing was sticky.
Yeah.
In marketing, we basically call this unaided recall. Like if we can say, what was it? What was it about? And if you can't come up with an answer, or you come up with gibberish, or even worse, I answer it one way, you answer it a completely different way, and a third person answers it another way, then the content isn't sticky. It still could be good stuff, but it's not going to be permeated. It's not going to change a bunch of people because there wasn't a consistent sayable element to it.
How often?
And so that's going to make it.
How often have you built something that, where you've kind of designed the one or two sayable things that come out of it, but the group or the person or, whatever, the meme that came out of it was either totally different or evolved or, an unintended externality, like an unintended outcome?
Well, let's shift that from a bug to a feature, shall we? So this is why you.
No, I'm not saying it was a bug. I think that is a feature, right? Because
no, you're right.
They own it, then, right? They've made their own thing.
Well, exactly, yeah. And you want to discover that, right? Because there's what you say and what people actually hear. And oftentimes, and all trainers who are listening to this have experienced a thing where you train something, and then afterwards the person comes up to you. That was so fantastic. When you said blah, 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 that totally is a game changer for me. And you're thinking, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But you don't tell them that. You just say, I'm so happy for you. Yes, thank you. So there is what you intend and what you can plan. And so a lot of this you can plan. You come up with a phrase or something like that. But when you test out a course, it's like something else oftentimes emerges. I was doing some training on how to give a good elevator speech, and basically and it was basically how to say what you do in such a way that people want you to keep talking. That was the core idea. And during the class, I ad-libbed this thing called verbal ping pong. I said, so it's kind of like, like you're playing verbal ping pong. Someone hits you the ball. What are you supposed to do? Hit it back. Don't hold on to the ball. And then afterwards, everyone said, it's like, I love your verbal ping pong system. No, it's yes, the verbal ping pong system. Yes, it's the verbal ping pong system. And so sometimes to your exact point, like we don't always know the part that's going to hit them the strongest. So that's why by doing test, classes, you find out what do they hear and what do they value, because oftentimes it's different from what we thought. And then you adjust to adopt and embrace what they embraced.
Fantastic. So we've got G.
So the last part was
I was just gonna say G. Yeah, we've got gettable, feelable.
Yeah, you said there's one more. Because I broke the rule. It was longer than 3 letters. Yeah, there was one more. It's like generally acronyms are better when it's 3. That's why almost all best acronyms are 3. But sometimes that's not enough. So the last one was actionable, which is in those cases, which hopefully is most of the time, there is something to do next. Now, again, in training where it's around a skill, like I'm being trained how to do this thing or how to do this sequence, then it's like, okay, the actionable next step is to repeat what you learned how to do in the class. But most training, especially soft skills training, is like maybe you did a role play or maybe you did something. So it's really, is there at least one action that you will do after, you will do next? Now, sticky could be, here's the crazy thing about training. Sticky could be, you haven't actually done it yet, but you know what it should be. And that's where sticky, it's like, okay, I know this action, whether or not I've done it yet, but I know what I'm supposed to do. Oh my gosh, here's that situation. Am I going to do it? Well, that's will, not skill. Will I do it or not? But it's like, but I know what I should do. And so if you have those elements, gettable, feelable, sayable, actionable, then there's a much stronger likelihood that your training will be sticky.
So the easy question for me to ask here is, what makes that challenging? What makes building something GFSA challenging? Is it the hard work of, taking more time to do it and really digging down and getting into that, like, not only what is it that you want, but, what is it that you're missing? Or are there other challenges that you've encountered as you're building that make it difficult?
I think the biggest challenge is our propensity to go first to information, and that we build our course as an information base, that if I just give you enough information, then the sheer weight of the logic and the great factoids that I've given you will make you learn this, remember it. And that's not how it works. Let me give an example. So let's say because we were talking about sales earlier. Let's say good salespeople, because we like training salespeople, because if they think it can help them, they're open to it usually. So let's say we're trying to train salespeople better. So if we look at our GFSA model, now it could be a problem that the business owner came to you as the trainer to fix, is that our salespeople, they'll go right to price. The customer basically says, how much does this cost? And then they just tell them, or they try and lead with, it's like, well, here's a product and you should really love this product. Hey, it's only blah, blah, blah. Like they lead on price. We don't want them to do that. We want them to train them. It's like price is like the last thing that you do. So that's like this grand what? Well, so I would say it's like in designing the course, it would be like, okay, let's come up with a sequence and give them that sequence and train them. Here's the steps we want you to do. And then we train them that one. It's like, but we haven't persuaded them yet. And it's not snappy and memorable. So if I was doing like something like that, I would start with, it's like, okay, well, what is the gettable aha? And the gettable aha could be, people will buy hope at a higher price than a discount. Like, wait a minute. They'll buy hope at a higher price than a discount. Like, okay, if they're buying on hope, then the price is going to be less relevant. That's the concept. Now that's harder to remember, but it's like, okay, but that's the concept. And so in a course, I would do the concept. Then the feelable would be, it's like, okay, examples of sales that got away and sales that were higher. And so just sharing like, here's Mary Schmidlap and Mary Schmidlap, and it's like, da, 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 and she's going through her thing here, and the talking, selling this, and the customer says, how much? And you say, it's $1,900. And woof, I don't know. And it's like, da, 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 and it's like, well, maybe we can work on a discount with you. And so you feel the pain of it, and the sale goes away, or she gets it, but it's like, and your commission at 10% is now this much.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, if you're selling hope and you're talking about it, it's like, okay, here's Bob Schmedlap, and he's in the situation selling, and the customers, how much is it? It's like, well, before we talk about the factor, let's talk about what is it you want this product to do? Well, if only we could do this, and let me show you how it does this. And it's like, oh, great. How much of it? It's $29.99. Great. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So which one would you rather be in? So suddenly we feel it. Now the sayable thing would be, it could be something like, hope before price. And if you wanted to, it's like, HBP, hope before price. It's like, what was this whole course about? Hope before price. And so if someone else, what was the course? Well, it's basically a new sales process. What's it about? It's hope before price. Always sell hope before price, hope before price. Every single carbon-based life form in that training class could repeat hope before price. And then for an action, you could give them it. So it's like, okay, since most of our sales are virtual now, it's like, okay, so and anytime you're on a Zoom or you're on a StreamYard or wherever you're going to be, and the customer says, how much is it? We want you to pinch your wrist, and that is a signal, have I sold hope enough yet? That's the next thing you do. It's like, how much is it? Boom. And if you think, yeah, I have, and it's like, that's $29.99. And if I haven't yet, it's like, before I tell you the price, it's like, so like, again, we have the concept, people will pay more for hope than they will for not hope. I feel it. I want to be more like Bob. Sayable, hope before price, action. Okay, every single time that the customer says, it's like, how much is it? We want you to pinch your wrist and think, did I sell hope enough first? Now, are they actually going to pinch the wrist? No. But because you went in your training class and you had to go through that experience of, okay, pinch your wrist, let's role play here, pinch your wrist and pull it. It's like, then they're going to think that. The brain will not be able to not think that. As soon as the person, how much is it going to cost? They're thinking, pinch yourself. No, I'm not going to pinch myself. But they're already thinking it. That would be sticky training. I got the concept. I felt it. I have a repeatable hope before price. I had a next step action that I was going to do. That's how we get there. But that's not how we usually do training. It's like, what's the sequence you want us to do? Let's give them all the information. Let's walk through the sequence. Let's do it, as many times as we can. And then go forth and do this. And then it's like, there was like a 5-step process they wanted me to go to. 5 is too many. I don't remember what the process is.
How does this, so it really, in my mind, discounts or, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say, like, we're in this hybrid world where, especially in the corporate universe, so much of it is delivered online, and so much of it is the sort of like the click by click, go through the course to get the new skill or get the new concept or whatever. It doesn't sound like any of it could ever be sticky in that way. Can we deliver like that, or is it really required?
It's definitely harder.
Sorry, synchronous. Does it require that synchronous kind of interactivity?
It absolutely can be done. I gave an entire webinar for an association. It was pre-recorded, and I got people interacting in chat. I tell them, it's like, okay, yeah, we know it's pre-recorded, but hey, you're all blah, 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 blah. So let's just imagine this is live here. And so then at that moment on, I never referenced pre-recording again. And I would say, okay, so post it in chat right now. And I look down as if I'm reading, like, okay, a lot of people are saying this, but here's the deal. It's just like it's like they've just forgot that it wasn't live, and they are responding to live energy, live habits, because people would prefer it to be live, but that's not how the world works anymore. And the next aspect of it's, again, all these things that we shared can be done. It's like, okay, what examples do you share? It's like, here's our truth. I'm oftentimes will become a vendor of a company, to help them. And sometimes I'll actually get like a contract or log on. But when that happens, so I have to go through all of their compliance training that employees have to go through. So that's always an eye opener.
That's
Here's what I do. It's like all compliance training. It's like there's going to be a 10-question quiz at the end, and you have to get 8 out of 10 right, or you have to repeat the quiz. So I just click, skip. And I go to the quiz. I take it once. I'm a very good guesser. I usually get 6 or 7 out of 10. I make notes which one I go down, and then I click take the test again, and then I get 8 out of 10, and then I pass without experiencing any of the content because it's all Captain Obvious stuff.
Right.
So that's when it's just stupid training. But again, all this stuff, you can do this with virtual and pre-recorded training just by making it interesting. My question is like, can you share something they don't already know in the first 60 seconds? If you can, you're going to buy what I call basically buy attention for another 2-3 minutes. Can you share something else they weren't expecting or surprise them? Now they're going to give you 5 minutes. Do something interactive where we made them do something. Like, oh, now I got another 10 minutes. So my thing is progressively buy attention, and then you can hold them for the whole thing.
When you're thinking of those moments where you're grabbing them like that, does it have to be related to the material or the outcome that you're trying to achieve, the actionable thing, or could it be like super random fact and that's just like the whoa, wait, what it's like it's that intention grabber?
I think yes and yes. I would say the standard most I think effective thing first is make things about me, about my life, about my industry. Now it can be here's a weird thing. It can be about your industry, but not actually be relevant, but that's still interesting. Doing a thing for a Dairy Farmers Association, and we did a trivia thing to open it out. And I remember one question was, which mammal's milk has the most protein per ounce? Cow, elephant, mouse, or chinchilla? And like, they've never heard this question in the history of the world.
Sure, yeah.
No one has ever asked this question, ever. And they're like milk experts. They're like, I don't know. It's like, well, elephant is bigger, but does that really? So it was mouse milk. And they're like, wow, that's fascinating. It's really hard to milk them, but hey, lots of protein in mouse milk. Now, that wasn't relevant, but it was about their industry. So
sure,
it was interesting.
It kept it within the wheelhouse
for some other thing.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, it's for your point of sometimes we can go right to popular culture because people like popular culture. And we can do stories or trivia or references that are outside here. Then we do what's called the turn. The turn is now I make that relevant to you. One of the things that I like to do in a class is I like to show television commercials. Technically, like, well, Brian, do you really have the copyright clearance to show a commercial during the thing? I've never met anyone ever who's gotten in trouble for showing a commercial where they pay money for them to reach people and using it, as long as you're not slagging them and saying, you want to hear a stupid Pepsi commercial? No, you're showing it in a positive way. Well, there was an old Super Bowl commercial from EDS, which is Electronic Data Systems, that doesn't even exist anymore, but it was about herding cats. This is like about a 20-year-old commercial, and it's got these cowboys. One thing I like about and they show these cowboys herding cats, and it's hilarious. And I still remember this commercial, and people are laughing at because older people who remembered are like, oh, I love this commercial. I remember this commercial. This is really funny. And other people are like, how have I never seen this before? This is hilarious. And then at the end, it says, EDS, blah, blah, blah. So I show this commercial and people are laughing. Again, this has nothing to do with their industry or anything. And then I say, here at XYZ Corp, what is herding cats for us?
Right. Yeah. What does it mean for herding cats?
So that would be your example of we can use popular culture to get their attention as long as we quickly do the turn where it's like, and here's how it's relevant for us. And we make it mean something. And then, of course, they're contributing to that. And then again, it goes to the famous, the famous legendary trainer, Bob Pike, which is people never argue with their own data. So then they start contributing. Well, here's what it means at our company. And you're like, yes, that's true. Is that a good thing? Should we try to change that? What do you think? Yes, we should. And then they're providing the impetus, they're providing the insights, and then you roll with it as a trainer.
I want to put a pin in it right there. People never argue with their own data, but you and I need to have to have a whole nother conversation about how you're interfacing with AI, but that's a whole nother hour of talk. Tell us what's the best way to get a hold of you so that you can help people GFSA all over the place.
GFSA, yeah. Let's make it a verb there. I like that.
Have verbalize there. You got to action orient everything. Come on.
Yes. Well, there's two ways. One, again, I told you you can email me at Brian@Extreme Trainings or Brian@Extreme Meetings. Both come to me. Usually we've got a website, extrememeetings.com, which is a little sexier and it's got more cool, funny things. And you can see me in my Dr. Phil impression and, doing the Rocky Horror Picture Ho parody, but that's another story. If you're interested in some sticky training techniques, we have a site called Training Bits with a Z, trainingbits, BITZ.com, trainingbits.com. And we've got some free resources there that folks, like I've got a volunteer ball technique and I've got another, technique that folks can go there and say, like, hey, I'd like to check this out. We also have other techniques where we've got little 90-second summaries that get no obligation. You can just check it out and go, that's really interesting. And if you can do it yourself, more power to you. If you want some help, you can click on that and let's just say we could help you with that.
Fantastic.
Brian, but there's some free stuff there, so it's all good.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and your hopefully your summer break to talk with us today on the eLearn podcast. I really wish you all the best and hope that we'll be able to talk again in the future sometime.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you again for listening to the eLearn podcast here from OpenLMS. I just wanted to ask one more time, if you enjoyed this show, if you learned something, if you were inspired, if you were challenged, if you feel like, this is something you can take into your practice, please do me a favor. And right now on your podcast player, hit subscribe. That way you're never going to miss a future episode. Also, come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe there as well, because we have tons of great information about how to create killer online learning outcomes. Thanks.